According to the National Electrical Code, specifically the 2002 edition, Article 511, there are distinct requirements for ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection in parking and storage garages, particularly in condominium high-rise settings. The code differentiates between parking and storage areas and closed-off equipment rooms within these garages. Receptacles located in parking and storage areas of a condominium high-rise are generally not required to have GFCI protection. Conversely, receptacles situated in closed-off equipment rooms within the garage levels are required to have GFCI protection. The NEC permits the classification of different areas within the garage, which means that the GFCI requirements can vary depending on the specific classification assigned to each area. The rationale behind these specific requirements is based on the use and potential risks associated with each type of space. Parking and storage areas are typically not designed or used for continuous human occupancy. Due to the limited human presence and activity in these areas, the risk of electrical shock is considered to be relatively low. As a result of this lower risk assessment, GFCI protection is not mandated for receptacles in these parking and storage zones. Closed-off equipment rooms, on the other hand, present a different risk profile. These rooms are specifically designated and used for the storage of electrical equipment. The presence of electrical equipment, including exposed wires and terminals, elevates the potential for electrical shock. To mitigate this increased risk, GFCI protection is required in these rooms. The GFCI devices are designed to quickly detect ground faults, which are a common cause of electrical shock. When a ground fault is detected, the GFCI trips the circuit, cutting off the power and preventing a potentially dangerous electrical shock. This requirement for GFCI protection in equipment rooms is intended to enhance the safety of individuals who may need to access these rooms for maintenance, repairs, or other tasks related to the electrical equipment. In summary, the NEC 2002 Article 511 establishes clear distinctions in GFCI protection requirements for parking and storage areas versus closed-off equipment rooms within parking garages. The distinction is based on the varying levels of risk associated with each type of space, with GFCI protection mandated in equipment rooms to safeguard against electrical shock hazards. It is important to always consult the latest edition of the NEC and local amendments for the most current and applicable requirements, as codes and regulations can change over time. Ensuring compliance with these codes is crucial for maintaining a safe electrical environment in parking garages and similar facilities. Firstly, consider the purpose of a GFCI. A ground fault circuit interrupter is a safety device designed to protect people from electrical shock. It works by monitoring the current flowing in a circuit. If it detects that some of the current is leaking to ground, indicating a ground fault, it quickly trips the circuit, cutting off the power. This happens very quickly, typically within milliseconds, which is fast enough to prevent serious injury from electrical shock. Secondly, think about the typical conditions found in parking and storage areas. These areas are often damp or wet, especially in climates where it rains or snows frequently. Water is a good conductor of electricity, so the presence of water increases the risk of electrical shock. Additionally, people working in these areas may be using electrical tools or equipment that could potentially have damaged insulation, further increasing the risk of a ground fault. Thirdly, the NEC addresses specific environments where GFCI protection is required. These typically include areas where there is a high risk of electrical shock, such as bathrooms, kitchens, and outdoor locations. The NEC also specifies requirements for GFCI protection in commercial and industrial settings, depending on the specific hazards present. The specific language in NEC 2002 Article 511 clarifies the requirements for GFCI protection in parking and storage garages. This article recognizes that while parking and storage areas may have some of the risk factors mentioned earlier, they are generally not considered to be high-risk environments that require GFCI protection for all receptacles. However, the article also makes an exception for closed-off equipment rooms within the garage. These rooms are treated differently because they typically contain electrical equipment that could pose a greater risk of electrical shock. Therefore, GFCI protection is required for receptacles in these rooms to provide an extra layer of safety. The ability to classify different areas within the garage is an important aspect of the NEC. This allows for a more tailored approach to electrical safety, where requirements are based on the specific hazards present in each area. For example, if a particular area of the garage is used for vehicle maintenance and involves the use of power tools and equipment, it may be subject to additional requirements beyond the basic requirements for parking and storage areas. It's important to remember that the NEC is a minimum standard for electrical safety. Local jurisdictions may have additional requirements that are more stringent than the NEC. Therefore, it's always a good idea to check with the local electrical inspector to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. To ensure that electrical work is done safely and correctly, it's essential to hire a qualified electrician. A qualified electrician will have the knowledge, skills, and experience to properly install and maintain electrical systems in accordance with the NEC and local codes. They will also be able to identify potential hazards and take steps to mitigate them. Remember, electrical work can be dangerous, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It's always best to leave it to the professionals. The NEC is regularly updated to reflect changes in technology and best practices. It's important to stay up to date with the latest edition of the NEC to ensure that electrical systems are installed and maintained in accordance with the most current safety standards. Changes to the NEC can have a significant impact on electrical installations. For example, a change in the requirements for GFCI protection could require the addition of GFCI receptacles or circuit breakers in certain locations. Ignoring these changes could result in code violations and potential safety hazards. Several factors contribute to determining whether GFCI protection is necessary for receptacles. Firstly, the presence of moisture is a key consideration. Damp or wet locations significantly increase the risk of electrical shock, making GFCI protection more critical. Secondly, the type of equipment used with the receptacle plays a role. Power tools, especially those used outdoors or in damp environments, pose a higher risk of ground faults and require GFCI protection. Thirdly, the occupancy of the area influences the decision. Areas accessible to the general public, particularly where children or elderly individuals may be present, often require more stringent GFCI protection. Fourthly, the specific requirements of the NEC and local electrical codes are paramount. These codes provide detailed guidelines on where GFCI protection is mandatory. The purpose of GFCI protection is to prevent electrical shock by quickly interrupting the circuit when a ground fault is detected. A ground fault occurs when current leaks from an electrical circuit to ground, often through a person's body. GFCI devices monitor the current flowing in the hot and neutral wires of a circuit. If there is a difference of more than a few milliamperes between the current flowing in these wires, it indicates a ground fault. When a ground fault is detected, the GFCI trips the circuit, cutting off the power in a fraction of a second. This rapid response prevents the person from receiving a dangerous electrical shock. GFCI protection is particularly important in areas where there's a high risk of contact with water, such as bathrooms, kitchens, and outdoor locations. It's also essential in areas where people may be using power tools or other electrical equipment that could potentially have damaged insulation. By installing GFCI protection in these areas, you can significantly reduce the risk of electrical shock and create a safer environment. Firstly, it's important to understand what constitutes a parking or storage area in the context of the NEC. Generally, these are areas primarily used for parking vehicles or storing goods, with limited human occupancy. Secondly, consider the specific characteristics of closed-off equipment rooms. These rooms typically house electrical panels, transformers, and other equipment, and may require occasional maintenance or repairs. Thirdly, the NEC allows for classifying different areas within a building based on their use and occupancy. This classification determines the applicable electrical codes and requirements. Fourthly, the decision to require or not require GFCI protection is based on a risk assessment, considering factors such as moisture, equipment usage, and potential for human contact. The NEC requirements for GFCI protection are based on the potential hazards present in different locations. In areas where there's a high risk of electrical shock, GFCI protection is typically required for all receptacles. This includes bathrooms, kitchens, and outdoor locations. In other areas, the requirements may be less stringent depending on the specific circumstances. The NEC also provides exceptions to the GFCI protection requirements in certain situations. For example, GFCI protection may not be required for receptacles that are not readily accessible or that are used exclusively for specific equipment. The reasoning behind these exceptions is that the risk of electrical shock is lower in these situations. The NEC specifies the types of receptacles that require GFCI protection. This typically includes 125-volt, 15 and 20 amp receptacles in areas where GFCI protection is required. However, the NEC also allows for the use of GFCI circuit breakers to protect entire circuits rather than individual receptacles. This can be a more cost-effective solution in some cases. It's important to follow the NEC requirements carefully when installing GFCI protection. This includes using the correct type of GFCI device, ensuring that it's properly grounded, and testing it regularly to verify that it's working correctly. Failure to follow these requirements could result in code violations and potential safety hazards. GFCI devices are designed to protect people from electrical shock, but they are not a substitute for safe electrical practices. It's still important to avoid contact with water when using electrical equipment, to inspect cords and plugs for damage, and to avoid overloading circuits. By following safe electrical practices, you can minimize the risk of electrical shock and create a safer environment. The NEC is a complex document, and it can be difficult to understand all of the requirements. If you have any questions about the NEC requirements for GFCI protection, it's best to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector. They can provide guidance on the specific requirements that apply to your situation. Remember that electrical safety is a serious matter. It's important to take the necessary precautions to protect yourself and others from electrical shock. By following the NEC requirements for GFCI protection and practicing safe electrical habits, you can create a safer environment for everyone. It is crucial to differentiate between general parking areas and enclosed equipment rooms when applying NEC guidelines. General parking areas, due to their open nature and infrequent occupancy, present a lower risk of electrical hazards. Enclosed equipment rooms, with their concentration of electrical equipment, pose a higher risk. Therefore, the NEC mandates GFCI protection in these rooms to enhance safety for personnel who may need to access them. The classification of different areas within a parking garage, as permitted by the NEC, allows for a tailored approach to electrical safety. This ensures that each area receives the appropriate level of protection based on its specific use and potential hazards. Local amendments to the NEC may exist, and it is essential to consult with local authorities to ensure full compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. These amendments can address specific local conditions or concerns that may not be covered in the national code. Therefore, consulting local authorities is crucial for ensuring a safe and compliant electrical installation. Proper grounding is a critical aspect of electrical safety. It provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, tripping the circuit breaker or fuse and preventing electrical shock. The NEC specifies detailed requirements for grounding electrical systems, and it is essential to follow these requirements carefully. Regular testing of GFCI devices is essential to ensure that they are functioning properly. GFCI devices should be tested monthly by pressing the test button on the device. If the device does not trip when the test button is pressed, it should be replaced immediately. This regular testing helps to ensure that the GFCI device will provide protection in the event of a ground fault.